process lines, interruption, location setting, interconnection setting, interprocessing. Data processing, line communication systems, all through administrations, your settings to your AI calculating lines into processing lines of operation lines and set travel. It puts you in all lines and position lines of calculation grounds. The operation location system comes into line center locations and setting. That process calculates lines into decline. Now that's deception line, operation lines, lines, levels, location lines, neutralized core centers, and existing and platform locations to your systems at a corporate structure in a quantum structure. That puts all position locations, how you come into your AI, your influencers, and position your branding, location your sole proprietors. And that puts all communication settings balanced that we have to process, indicate through energy lines of flush. Okay, welcome to Space-Time Odyssey. What a relief. Where we left off before you guys put yourself in fantasy. Okay, so we digitalize the zoning lines of set position January 1st of 0 point lines of 1. Okay, calculate modifying lines of space, lines of void, or lines of ground centers, lines of travel. So converting that position location you guys left off in your nanoline routes, we'll continue on that pathogen lines of collagen locations into quadrant 12, district 3. That's where we are in that position. So our DQs are now digital lines of quantum. Process lines of line course centers, converting line position location nano routes over screen. Adaptations of flux, travels lines of location setting. Aerodynamics, process lines of travel. Okay, so the calculation of your schematics lines of screen location setting comes more lines in your position lines of calculation to your clearance and your data. That gets you into how to process lines of travel 2000. We got a ground line centers in indicate line connection setting. Travel point lines of graph is digital lines of frame lines, and once you reach 144 flux, your letters, numbers, shapes, symbols will disappear. And when they disappear, you come to motivation lines to existing informations of creators. That process you in an indication system. Your body conception line is an alignment, lines in the location that associates the system with its own AI input and its outputs, its data. That process lines into position where you come into your own setting of your own incline. That process your decline system. Now that process your direct and redirect location setting, how you modify your line position digital worlds that we process in frame. Getting into position lines and calculate lines into your digits, your dabits, your location setting, that process you and direct locations calculations. So converting lines to direction line location setting, knowing exactly that. So January 1st is 01. So we're going to go through the basic line grounds. Now you guys have your test setting lines of screen locations, position lines of travel. Now you have to convert line position your geos, your geotheuriums, and understand how to use it through weather patterns. Understand line communication setting. So that's position. So let's start off with 01 of travel. Okay, equals lines of triangulation. Let's get the triangulation box in the frame. And we'll get a flux. So you guys got to understand how to come to hieroglyphics. Hieroglyphics is more of administration level that you reach is lines and line signal, location your echoes, and location your systems, and process your indication lines of flux. Now the echo and sonar gets you in communication how you come in your digital lines of clocking, digital lines of framing, digital lines of formations, and digital lines of pi. Okay? So that indicates lines of flux over travel. Okay? So that's one codification grounds. Okay, so the process line position of 3 centers. Okay, that process line equals lines of a 0, 0, 3 instead of travel. Okay, so that's 0, 0, 2 lines of course centers and 3 lines of measure and dimensional and solar sail. The operation line signals correlates its calculation modify into competence line position location. AI generates lines of its branding through its information system that process lines through a system, which is sole proprietors. Coming into that digital framing, process in 144 flux. Now, once you reach 144 flux, which process all direct location in your system, you come in your set lines and portals and stargates and screen adaptation of travel. Okay? So I'm trying to get you guys to understand how it comes in own towers of its own communication system and calculations. All right? Platitude here, and that position your vertebrae 6, 8, 12, and 24 set lines of calculation. Okay? Wall sequence platforms over screen lines, bedding over lines, rotation lines of flux over travel. Okay? Sets calculation lines, ground centers, and location setting, symbolism lines of grounds, operation signals, operation travel, operation center of operation lines of setting. Sets convergence line direct locations, correlations, directions, allocating time frame lines, and location of center operation lines of travel. So your position lines of settings gets a lot more complicated in digital lines lock line, communicate screen lines, and position your solar sails. The operation line signals, platitudes, location settings, all through mechanisms and location system, all through directions and location lines of calculation. Okay? So the drawings just get a lot more complicated through pi lines. and high direct location setting, converting lines of direction. Okay, so now you understand the lines are quantum line centers. Now we go into the nanoline roots and 0.1 decimal. That's where you guys left off. That's where we continue on, all right? So 12 quadrants in District 3. Okay, so that process you're setting colonies, your efficacy, your performance, times centers, times squares, times roots, times pi in travel, right? So you guys have to understand just logging in and logging out, right? 12 centers of signals, so 12 centers operation, 12 set calculation lines, changing 12 center line positions into zeros and ones. Okay, that puts lines of application, lines of grounds, 0 travels, 0, 2. Position lines equal lines of 1 times 1, or 1 flux lines over travel. Setting converted lines position location, use your adding, multiplication, subtracting, dividing location ratio proportions. Now that puts all position location how you go in your metric meters, scales, and balance. So all you're creating is portals of communications, 2 centers of lines and line communication converting, process lines of 1 over line, rotation line connections to line, dimension lines of solar sail, set position 2 lines measure. Now the decimal point separates the line screen. It's a flash drive line communication to its position that sets barometer, thermometer, temperature reading, location setting to its calculation setting to its relays. Operates lines as portals, stargate location setting at travel. So converting lines 0, 2, process lines of 0, lines of 1, 1, 0 line operation. Set calculation time triangulation and box. Okay, flux over screen, datation of 0, 1 over travel. Okay, 3 indicates lines of grounds. All right, so we got portal 1, we got portal 2, and you got portal 3 and set lines of travel. Okay. So this is all through nanos, nanoseconds, nanoflights, manifest, manifold. All right, so you have to send your IPAs, process lines into your FAAs, that position your IPOs. Okay, your initial points, your operation lines of grounds, your schematics over screen, equals lines of 13, process lines of FAA, your foundations, your administrations, and your altitudes. Right lines send location your IPA, which is your initial point graphs, calculates lines, the atmosphere lines of change frames, and your position locations of your location. All right. Then you have your DOS, your data processor, operating system. Okay. And then you have your iOS. Your iOS is line condition intelligence, calculation operation lines to its processing of its programming, indoor locations to its adjusting formations, to its models, and its prototypes of design line. Contraction. Okay. Now that puts all position location systems all through settings. Okay, to space-time odyssey. School time as a frame line. Now that process lines how we formulate and communication settings to graph lines. Starting graph lines and settings your highways and travel. It's that position triangulation. Okay, triangulation in a highway setting. Okay, triangulation, box frame locations in a highway setting. It's that position. Okay. This is done through nano. Quantum is a line sending out line signals. Now we go in box frame. Now we plotted 2 docking stations over 0, 1, process lines of 0, 2, process lines of 0, 3. And then we go back to 0 and send our operation of question. And send lines a mark of our channel. Now that correlates to communication setting. The reason why you have to process the lines of 0, because that is your fail-safe. Equals lines into your jump program. J equals lines in program and position location setting. Okay. So it's interesting how we plotted 2 lines of screen locations. Now the decimal points are the connections to its line setting. So the process location setting. 0, 1, how to turn on a computer. Okay, now that process line position is 0, and that goes lines of 0, 2. Okay, and then we go back to 0. So all we're doing is we're building a construct into an energetic line pattern that processes our position locations to an energetic field that we come into an energetic dome, right? So as you go into the days, months, and years, you understand how to go to direct and redirect. As you're processing that, okay, all you're doing is processing the position, creating a dome, a set lines of operation, right? So that's weaving, woving, line condition, interaction, set location, setting, okay? Interconnect, interweave, interwove, interweb, right? Process lines of light, process lines of dark, okay? Together in one, okay? Don't separate the light equals lines of dark. Don't do this in traction because there's no indication lines of flux. That separates the lights, that separates the darks of travel. That has no indication lines of flux, that multitudes its levels, the division lines of rotations, into 12 converging settings and low spectrum of light and travel. So don't do that, okay? Stay above the 144 flux to an operation setting and location setting. Don't process lines of 0, 1, okay, until you understand location of 0. Don't process lines at 0, 2 until you understand how process lines back to 0. Okay? So we got 0, 0, 1. Okay? Platitude line position to 0 equals lines to 0, 2. All right? So I'm just trying to get you guys to understand how to turn on a computer and how to turn off a computer at the same time, measure and scale, because you go through light and dark through line communication or lights. False signals lines back to 0. Okay? So let's say you flick off and on the light switch on your panel that's on the door handle, and that position line to travel, or panels converting system location, electrical line, grid line, core centers of calculation lines position of travel. What you have to understand is the process, how fast you're going with your fingers. All right, your fingers are going this way and that way all at once, right? So it's multitude of time centers line position 1.0. Okay, that's where your hand goes really fast. It's position 1.5, 2.0, and 2.2. Okay, time centers, center lines are 3 flux over lines, 3 centers of travel, 4 centers of scale, and flux line capacitor over set calculation settings. Okay, so it's all about understanding how to process the indication setting from 0, 1 and use a decimal point. So you have a 0, you have a point, and we have a 1. Okay, so if we add the 1 line, it processes back to the fail state. 1 equals lines of 0 on standby. Okay, so it's really interesting how you use that. Use the travel mechanism, use that line, position, scale, and balance, but all get into the dimension of solar sail through 1. Don't have a 1 indicate line's position and setting through 1 graph line. Have a 1 floating in rotation of space itself, so it can modify and monitor its own system, how it goes on its own line, position of its own dimension of its own solar sail. That's what you have to go through now, through nanoroots, okay, in that position. Everybody else goes through the quantum flux, right? Interludes, line centers of travel, okay? So back to 0, 1, okay? And 0's in the center. 0's always in the center, always in the center, okay? So 0, 1 comes in pattern, records of time, and 0, 2. Now it's communicating position lines of setting in an alpha delta wave. Okay, so that's 0, 1, back to 0, 3. So my voice tripled 3 centers and sent lines of travel. So I'm trying to get you guys to understand how to modify your voice line panel so you can process your throttles. Your throttle to your neck gets in communication to capacity, your time capacity, your body capacity, location of flux, the process location, your part acceleration lines of time frame. Setting lines of screen adaptation setting. Center is the operation lines that equal lines everything in platforms from 12 below and 12 above, and set lines of travel. Setting position lines of triangulation up and setting line position triangulation down in process communication system. Clicking the switch, my line conceptual line condition setting 2 sails and both side line rotation. Both angles, right? So 1 sail going this way and 1 sail going that way and set lines of travel. Okay? You put that together, it operates the setting, comes up polarities and set lines of travel, and infinity a rotation setting and circulation system and travel. Okay, and a constant continuous flow. An opposition of center operation. Okay? So it's really interesting how you process that through indications. Then you go through your platforms. Then you go through your bedding and ground lines and set lines of travel. Okay? So you modify everything in the settings, but you're looking at 4 different angles and travel communications of flux. Okay? It's really interesting how you see it in all formation setting. All through indication, right? So it's very powerful when you come into that level. All right, there's 0s, 1s, and decimals and lines of screen locations. You're creating lights and lines of communication setting and central line communications. Then you set up platforms, circulation, rotation, and you get a line, position, rotation, circulation, overline signal location of travel. Okay? So this is going to help you guys understand how to process the 0.1, because it can be 0.1, 0 1, or you can trifactor, box it in that position lines of calculation system. But leaving off in line rotation, circulation, and rotation lines of setting, process your calculations and how do you see your 6 lines and 9 line rotation of surface and travel. Okay? Good. So, as we get in that position locations, we truly understand how to get into the dimension and solar sail of everything, right? So you have to process how you communicate from 0, 1, as I'm talking in that position. So as I speak, okay, I'm speaking through monotone, and then up, and then down. Okay? Up, and then down, right? So how many times did I flux? How many times did I time frame? How many times did I time coordinate? How many times did I longitude, my latitude, my streaming, my bandwidths? How many times did I set my voice panel and position monotone? You guys have to understand your computer operating setting. And it keeps bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until you recognize it. When the body recognizes that position, Then it goes do-do-do-do, do-do-do-do, do-do-do-do. So it keeps repeating until you can acknowledge the actual sonar or echo that's coming in position. So it's processing your set location inside and outside lines of travel. So you got an interlobe and an outer lobe. Interconnections, outer connections. Everything's an enter to an exit that we have to process through. But from that process line communicates the graph lines. It's a 13-line scale, which is higher self. There's a graph that indicates setting lines of communication lines of voice and panel. So it goes up or it goes down, all right? Or meter is off, line position. So it can stay at 0, 1, okay, at that whole time frame, but it's got to be in observation mode. That's observation mode, grounding centers, and travel communication, all right? So process that, directions, change all communication high centers as travel to its graph communication lines of setting. The operation line service, platitudes location system, all through travel. Okay, so it's going to get very complicated, I'm telling you, through decimals. All right, so we have a 0 here. You got a 0-point decimal. Okay, that's one communication lines of setting. So as you add a decimal, that's an equal sign. So that's a line time frame, time calculation, times square roots over graph. There's your central graph communication, your higher graph line, central location, higher self. Now that process line, position, location, measure, and scale. Now that communicates setting to alpha tone, a beta tone, theta tone, zeta, gamma. What you have to start indicate position, location, setting is understand how to process that position, location, ground lines setting. Process here, or process here, and travel communication of direction. Okay? So it really gets interesting how you see it through energetic patterns and simulation lines of grounds is that position. Okay? Really amazing stuff when you see a graph of communication. All right? Which is human resonance. That's what you're indicating through. Okay, so understanding the center graph is a point graph. Now, center graph is one setting. That process lines is one travel in one direction, right? An offline graph is a void graph in position. So that's negative, point line 0. So that the indication lines in position, you have an override signal, okay? And you have a one signal line ground, and you get a plus line, time line 1 equals line 0 line rotation of travel. So, like I said, it's going to get very confusing to anomalies because you're now indicating what you're doing in travel in position of processing triangulation lines of flux. So every time you speak, you're speaking value, you're speaking volume, you're speaking the indicates and letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols. You're creating a dimensional lines of sail, the process of solar sail itself, the process of the position location from zeros and ones. So 0, 1, okay, travel position, creating a triangulation because it's all lines of visual cortex that we pick up through theta, just an image itself, okay? Not words, just the image. Words itself is just the width, the operation of readjusting the direction. That's what a word is. Process that, found it in line, so it's locations, write it down, attractions. So you got 0, 1 here, we got 0, 2 here, and we got 0, 3. Okay, but we go back to center of 0 of operation. There's the dome. So all you're creating is a dome. The reason why you have to create a dome, because everything is connected through a dome itself that energizes setting to its position location that processes everything you process through. Now, in that position, like the calculations, green locations, knowing how to come into the connection set into the consignments, location your AI system, knowing exactly how to see yourself through your own influencers, how to see an energetic dome around your house in that position that's set up in your travels. And your city is inside rotation and calculations that you created through holographic structure of pixelation graphs. There's your city with an energetic dome, okay? All through this line's adaptation, all right? All right, so the decimation is the automation setting, a transautomation translocation setting that puts all position of your transformer into your transponder units that puts position. So let's add 13 scales because we're at 13 lines into equals lines of 5. So my phone is communicating at lines of 13 lines position. Now it's over lines of 2. So that's 13 times 2 is 15 measure, okay? So there's nothing in time frame. I'm just going through the equilibrium line, core centers, the polarity lines, and set travels at 0, 1. So 0, 1 is here, traveling position, all right? Then I go through 0, 2, right? But in between is the point, is the decimal, right? So you can have 0, 1 here, point center here, or you can have 1, point 0, or you can have 0 on standby. Standby is above the system, right? So the equal lines of 8 over travel, okay? Now, anything lines of 4 is set position of 3, 2, and 1, and set position of 0 gravity, and set lines of travel communications. So it's a higher lines of hieroglyphics and a higher line communication nanoline setting, location setting, where you process the zeros, ones, where you want to put them in time replacements, and 0 calculation grounds to set lines of travel. There's your teleportation vessel. Okay, so it's set lines of convenient location system and all through adaptation lines of flux and travel communications. So it modulates the screen lines and process lines and set location to travel. directing in position location of systems. 42 lights, 42 lines of settings. There is your set position, your system through your solar sail and set travel. Oh yeah. Okay. So your central setting is your direct. Now understanding light and understanding dark. Understanding light and understanding dark. Okay, start with that position, right? Light and dark, all right? And you got the decimal point in the center. So we got a 0, 1 here. We got a 0 over here. We got a 0 over here in set position, right? But it's always creating an energetic dome, right? So when you get out of the triangulation box, there is no triangulation box because it's invisible now. We're in the holographic line communication, right? Which is an invisible line. And that's what you have to get out of. You have to get out of the solidarity to consolidarity of the translucent thermal and X-ray location setting that you're not seeing letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols because it's always in its non-existent form until it comes in its form itself. Then it shapes its anomaly of location setting to its position that processes everything that engages in set lines to its GOD, the geometric operation of design that you have to modify through its operation system that puts you in all communication lines of travel. Okay, good, done. So there is the energetic dome, right? So that's what you have to get in positions of, because once you come in that position locations, all you're looking is a holographic city that's in a central dome. Okay. Now that puts lines of deferments, ethers, and the cores in your set lines of travel. Okay, which is nothing but a window wash, line direct line course centers calculation setting. That converts all lines at all different angles of your webbing system all through your proxy location of channels. Data operation lines of travel, data operation lines of signals, data operation lines of high operation location setting to your AI influencer. Now that lines of communication setting has a branding location to its system that sole proprietary everything location to its adjustments. Setting lines of travel in platforms of E-lines, rotation lines of box frame location of travel. Okay? Setting calculation, there's your cube, right? There's your treasury. Treasury opens up, indirect lines, lens, signal location setting, process lines of 4 centers of calculation screen location of travel. Okay? So it really gets interesting how we formulate and simulate ourselves our own treasury of our own design. Okay, inside the calculation. Platitudes this way, and set lines of calculation. Ground center, symbolism line operation. Operation lines travels, 0 calculation line, position operation lines of signal. Okay? So it gets really interesting when we modify our settings of travel. Okay, through sols and our direct line center locations. Solar sail, all right? So it's line connection setting to AI is your line communications now. Okay, is administration to its intelligence of operation of processing. Okay, that's what it is in set position. All right. All right. So process is engaging, forming, and shaping your anomalies. Okay. So understanding that through conversion, I get a better understanding of how to opt its system running its own operate line centers and position location of graph that puts you in position your line connection setting that puts you in process calculation ground lines out to 0.1 in that position location system, platitude 2 lines of division location lines across lines of angles in that position. So the more you use your imagination, the more you understand what you're doing through indication. All right. How 0 goes 1. And how 1, 0 goes 0, 0 back to 0, 1, back to 0 line operation. Just stay with 0 line operation, go back on 1 lines. Process lines of 2, be cautious now because your voice is going higher. Process line 3, going higher. Position back to 0, back to monotone. It's set lines of travel, okay? So if you really look at it really close, you can see the face pattern recognition, what you process through and travel. Everything has a pattern recognition of the face line. That process line is position location setting that grounds the system. The operational location of the platform set 42 digits lights and 45 line centers of the communication system that travels in calculation. Okay? So understanding that to the grounds, understanding that to the webbing system, each line signals comes in modification system, all through pixelation of hologram. Okay? Your webbing system of data, your processing system of data, your operation system of your rainbow graph lines of data of communication system, your webbing system. Okay? And you already know the point graphs when it comes into your set lines of communication, your Skynet, and set lines of travel. So that puts all position line inside of communication system. Okay? Now once you come into that position, you bring in the X2000s. Okay? X2000s here, X2000s here. You got the line signals and line communication settings all through process calculation. Right? And also, again, you can bring in your mothership. All right, so you're gauging, you're forming, you're setting the direct signals. You're getting lines of open signal and locations and set lines of calculations to Tango Tango Foxtrot using metric meters of scale, your electronics location system in real time. Okay, how you process that, lines of the grounds, the powers, the atmospheres, bring in XC thousands or motherships and mother loads that process your in position your distribution systems. Okay, coming in that position, your dispatch to Discord. Okay, but that's all it is in lines of operation itself. You can see it in all different levels of calculation of travel. Okay, it's your imagination, people. That's all it is. Nothing else, nothing more. How you see your own formula, how you see your own equations, how you see your own set position, your own individual systems. So you have to come in your own multiple levels. So you stop seeing 1 times 1 just equals 1. Because if you take 3 line signals, okay, 1 times 1 equals 1 times 3. Okay, 1 times 1 equals set positions. So that process line position, so you get a 1 times 1, okay, equals lines. There's 2, right? 2 times lines of 1, add 3 lines of signal. Okay, same position. Okay, 1 times 1 equals 3 by signal. So I'm getting you guys to understand how to bend this space now. Everything you modify through is bending space. Okay, so that's 1/3 center of operation signal. Okay, so it's going to get a lot more fun now through indications. Aerodynamics, high grounds, high signals, modify line operation signal location setting and travel. Okay. So it's really interesting as we look at that screen locations. Through ceiling operation settings, running operation location grounds. So we're going to go position of 1 times 1. Position lines equals lines of 1 over frame. Point graph, set course centers, timeline centers, sectors over pi in travel. There's your building right there. It's that sequence. Set position operation travels, 42 lights, 42 line centers into box frame and triangulation flux. Okay, very complicated drawing, but it's all through formula to quantum. Okay, the structure is a little bit more depth, more core line and reline. And it's a high line center location system, how you see it through your networks, your neural links, your neuropathological system, and your neuropathy. That's right, neuropathy. Uropathy, not neuropathy, not in that setting, not in near line center locations. Setting direct lines is a flux line angle that we process in line direct location setting. We see the schematics location that puts converting system all through travel of communication of conversion, face recognition. Right? There's always a face there. So understanding how to modify that, and you look really, really close, you can see the face recognition of timeline as that position of operation. Okay? So that's what you can do with 1 times 1 equals anything. So that modifies everything. But everything you go back to 0 is the failsafe. As you come in at 0, 1, now you're speaking. You're speaking volume, you're speaking mass, you're speaking calculations, you're speaking your formula through calculus, through times, through pi. So 0, 1, process lines, okay, you can go 1, okay, so that's 0 to 0, 4. Okay? And then you go 0, 4 to beta wave, which is right? So you downshift your anomalies, every dimensional, and rotation lines of SID and position lines of calculations. So that's one 6-line screen, 3rd line rotation lines of surface and travel. All you guys have to understand is how to create a sail. So sail your projections of your line, position your programming, process your accessing location of direct lines of view that get you in positions, how to modify your settings into a flow of recognition with the water. As the water flows, crashes, drips, and that position of its settings, right? But it's a constant continuous flow that keeps going through its modification of its mind, that keeps experiencing new levels of its auto operation system. Okay, it just keeps expanding and keeps exploring and keeps getting in explorations, knowing exactly what it's doing through its expeditions of its system. Okay, through extradition. Now, the judiciary system is a process calculating how to modify lines of travel and direct lines of position of scope. Now, that lines of screen location set in the process you indicate the system, how you travels lines of directions, locating line ground centers, and flux over screen location. Okay? Inside calculation. Okay? And that's what I'll have to get in positions of now. And what goes on into the set travel of communication itself. Your Skynet. All right? So once you get your Skynet, then you can set up 0. Okay, I'm calculating position to 0, lines of time frame, line condition, login in space. Journal AI, 0, 1 over travel, set process 0, 3, line connection, 0, 4, line position, 0, 5, line position, 0, 1, set lines back to 0. Okay, so that's what I'm doing. I'm using my voice panel, but I'm not going too high. Okay, because that takes me out of the district, that takes me out of quantum, that takes me out of flux, that takes me out of proxy, that takes me out of my perimeter, my parameters, that takes me out of the proximity of my system of frequency and energy and vibration harmonics that you have to implicate through in your system all through travel. So every time you're changing your voice, you're changing the patterns of recognition, the face recognition, time frame, and set locations in your systems, okay? So keeping lines of all core centers, directing line communication and cosmic lines of a reaction into response. Acting upon, reaction is response, reaction location to respond. Action and lines of response, location to read, line condition setting to read, position, location, and travel. So it's all lines is just get into the ebb and flow, how to go into letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols through travel recognition setting, okay? Don't get stationary and do this. Okay, intro. Okay, run system, operation signals. So you're just setting graph lines of signals, right? No. Have fun with it. Get into position how one travels, how one operates a signal location of travel, how position one service lines of 3 lines of travel communications, how equal lines core centers 4 arrows of indication lines of flux, how the mind operates the signals. So I'm changing core centers. I'm never in the same signal. I'm always communicating, expanding the operation system all through travel. Okay? Very powerful stuff, guys. Okay, so stop being stagnatic and just have the ebb and flow of your system. When you're looking at the ocean, it's constantly changing its frame. So it's never in the same direction. It's never in the same ripple. It's never in the same frame. It's never in the same color. It's never in the same time, but it's all happening all at once in real time. Okay? So let's get 15 channels operation into 5 signals. Now, did I say anything of time frame? No. Right? I'm modifying my nano roots. Login line, grounds. High centers of travel, core center position 0 lines of 1. Now you've already gone through the creation of creating through your voice line. That's crazy too. Your voice has already gone through the voice itself. So that's where the body has to really get into its reconvening system, through its coding system, know exactly it's already done through its data. It's already processed location through its indications, all through its flux. Flux capacitor is everything at travel, okay? But knowing you already had a conversation with your voice is extremely powerful in its own system of operation, okay? Now my phone has gone into 17 centers of channel, operation lines of 5 set position operation settings. So what 555, triangulation box, 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 3 box lines of 5 line rotation. That's standby, right? So I get 42 lines of 5 signals, 42 lines of 5 signals, 42 lines of 5 signals, operation lines of signal. All right, so it's all lines, all position locations. The more you have fun with it, the more you understand what you're doing and set lines of operation and set. Okay? So that's basically what it is in set calculations. Knowing how to convert your setting, how to communicate your voice from 0, 1, okay? And how it goes up and down through flux of its capacitor and transponder, okay? Just the flux itself through face recognition. Face recognition, triangulation, equals lines equations, process lines here, process line here, ear line rotation lines of calculation setting, rotation surface and travel galaxy lines, connection setting, face recognition, pattern recognition, right? Then you come into position lines and settings, all through set position your neck, process line door location, your body lines of framing, all right? Which is your iOS, okay? Which is your nothing but your processing, your prototypes, and model type location of design. So every time you're speaking, you're creating the dimension solar sail travel, okay? You're speaking through 0, okay? 0 can be anywhere. 0 doesn't always have to be in the center, because at the center, it can be anywhere it wants to be. So the 0 can be here, or the 0 can be here, right? So that can be 0, 1, okay, and that's 0, 2, and then position lines and setting 0, 3. So 0, 1 is always in the center. It doesn't have to be in the center. The center itself is the center. So you decide where you want to be the center of. It could be center of operation, 0 calculation. There's center right there. There's another center. There's another center. Okay, because it's all center all at once. Okay, very powerful stuff, the webbing system, right? Processing that position at 10,000 line angles, 24,000 line grounds, set position 48,000 frames, 72,000 line operations, and position location 144 flux, game screen location at the center. Back and center operation at line communication, infinity 8 line rotation. There's infinity 8 rotation lines of screen, okay? But everything I do is modification, ebb and flow, a transition. Get into the automation of on position location, how to use your AI influencer, how to use your own branding system, how to use your own system, sole proprietor that you come into modification of, okay? Your AI generations of your AI bot, okay? Every set position, your settings, your sectors, vectors, quads, and your units, and your cores, okay? Where you left off in Space-Time Odyssey, okay? And nanoroots, 0.1 of direction, okay? Process line, position lines are 0 point lines of location lines of signal. So all you're constantly doing is speaking. That's all you're doing. You're speaking, you're analyzing, but you're speaking already spoke what you already spoke. So you've already gone through the set position of operation. So having that conversation gets you a lot more understanding what the body's already gone through. As it just gets confirmation, it gets verified and noted. It's just listening to everything that's already processed through. So that's where the sentient and the symbiote continue on through equalization sitting, continue on position, location, day, months, and years. Then you start to recognize how to create the energetic dome, how to communication line 0-1, how to use the voice panels, how to use communication, how to log in, log out in space, how to modify this system, how to go through operation, stay in line, position of center, operation of travel. All time in set position operation itself. Okay? Okay, so I think we're good on that note. Okay, if I go any further, you guys are going to go, poof, wow, this is a lot to take in. Of course, there's a lot to take in because now you're seeing it in real time. So it's all structured in your system through creating, not creation, not co-creating, just the creating of creators. Because that's all you guys have been, that's all you always will be. But your process is knowing exactly how to control yourself, know yourself completely unconditionally is how everything's operated inside of you 100% time. Not 80%, not 60%, not 40%. 100% is zero. Now, when you change that, you're going to 0-1. Now you're going to higher frequency. Now you're going. So every time the wind, the whistling, all communications, when the wind's going, it's going this way, and then it's going this way, then it's going this way, then it's going this way, it's going this way, it's going this way, but it's always in center. But it's just processing where it wants to be in center, right? That's the indication where it comes into 0-1 to 0-2, 0-3. Okay? So wherever you put in center is always back to 0, right? So you don't get confused with your anomaly, right? So that's where it comes into the failsafe, which is always 0. 0 equals lines of question. And all position, question here, question here, question here. So I got position lines of north, east, west, and south, always back in position lines of 0 and center of operation itself. Okay? You're not putting yourself in center because you've already gone through center, through creating. Now, once you get out of the center, you can change time frame now. Okay, but you can't modify that until you really understand that you don't do anything. The body is just here to understand by listening to itself 100% time frame. So it knows exactly what it's looking from outside. It's seeing its own operation, its own self. Okay, it doesn't need to modify its own voice because it's already gone through its own voice. It doesn't need to modify its own space and time because it's already gone through space and time. So the more you get in projection of your own system, the more you come into your mind and to depict the location that's already done through its creating, it's much easier to come back to yourself of who you are through just the creator that you are of operation itself. Okay? All right, so we'll be in classification D. We're in position lines at quadrant 12. We'll be in district 4. District 4. Okay? See you in 5.